Atom RPG is an answer to the question, what if Fallout but communism? We're talking the first two Fallouts, by the way, not the stupid new shit. We don't got time for first-person cameras or real-time combat. This is a game for men. Isometric view and turn-based fistfights is the name of the game here. On that topic, you may have noticed that there was a game that came out here just recently that has blown out people's expectations, and now, by the grace of Marx, we have a classic-style role-playing game that's topping sales charts in the year of our collective 2023. Take into account the other recent games that have helped bring the once-dead genre back into relevancy, and it's a CRPG revolution, comrades. Nerds of the world, rise up. You have nothing to lose but your battle passes. So throw away all those modern gameplay conveniences and join me as I navigate the treacherous world of... Alright, cringy role-playing mode over. Before we get into the game proper, I want to talk a little bit about the historical background we're dealing with here. Atom RPG is not just a game set in Russia, it's a game about Russia. Or more accurately, Russia during the Soviet era. Russia is, and has for many centuries been, a very large country. The nation's history has been defined by a continuous series of questions surrounding its identity. Is it an Eastern European country or a Northern Asian one? Is its most defining political legacy that of Tsarist autocracy or Soviet communism? How does it relate to its neighboring countries, many of whom were once parts of it, that have developed their own regional identities over the course of many centuries that they are fully struggling to establish and preserve in the wake of their relatively newfound independence? These questions continue to be at the forefront of the political and cultural conversations surrounding Russia's place in the modern world. But these inquiries aren't exclusive to just this one post-Soviet state, but are instead relevant to all of them, and it's this strange, often contradictory history that continues to play a huge role in the situation in this region. The reason I bring all of this up is because Atom RPG is very concerned with the history of the region its developers hail from. Set in the remnants of the Central Soviet Union 20 years after a devastating nuclear war, the game is filled to the brim with both nostalgia and criticism of the 1980s Soviet Union, much in the same way that Fallout is for the 50s-era United States. The exact specifics of the political situation leading up to the war are never given, or at least I never found them. Aside from some stuff about the war starting over a battle at the Berlin Wall, the game doesn't really deviate too heavily from real-world history the way that Fallout does. The basic gist of the story is that you're a cadet in an organization called Atom, a clandestine group created by the Soviet military just prior to the apocalypse that is meant to gradually reintroduce and reestablish the old government and society to the wastes. You wake up one morning and are greeted by another member of the organization, Alf, presumably named after the famous communist militant of the same moniker. He tells you to get your lazy ass up as there's shit to do and capitalists to overthrow. At this point, the tutorial begins. The tutorial basically consists of going around the base and clicking on everything that gets highlighted in green when your mouse hovers over it. You learn all the game's basic mechanics here, inventory management, cooking, a very basic preview of how combat works, and also that you should steal everything that isn't nailed to the floor. Your ammo? No, comrade, shit for brains, our ammo. My personal highlight of this area was this boxing ring that is clearly supposed to be where you practice hand-to-hand combat with good ol' Alf, but the game doesn't actually require you to put away your gun, so I just shot him in the face instead. It was a less than lethal round, so he'll probably wake up eventually. After learning the absolute basics of how this game works, I was ready to accept my first mission for the Atom organization. At some point prior to the start of the game, I'm guessing maybe a couple of weeks, an Atom expedition led by a dude named General Morozov went missing while exploring a military installation called Bunker 317. Our job is to go to the bunker and find out what happened to them. Now that the tutorial is out of the way, let's talk about the character I built. Atom RPG is a fairly standard character creator, nothing innovative, but it's tried and tested. The big thing you have to understand is that the game heavily encourages you to make a specialist character. It's not as min-max heavy as something like Underrail, where if your build wasn't completely focused around one thing, you'd have to restart the game, but generally speaking, if you play this game, you're going to want to focus mostly on only a couple of skills. I went with a kind of quasi-sniper build. I maxed out attention and intellect and put dexterity up pretty high, mostly ignored strength and personality, and put luck all the way down to 1. As far as I can tell, luck is mostly useless, so if you ever play this game for yourself, just take most of your points from that and put it into something else. For the skills, I ignored pretty much everything and dumped all 20 starting points into Speechcraft, this game's equivalent of the speech skill from the Fallout series. The reason I didn't put anything into my gun skills is because having a maxed out intellect gives me a shitload more points to put into skills with each level up, so I can just start dumping all my points into those after the first few quests. I picked 2 traits, Glutton, which means my guy is a fat fuck who needs to eat constantly, but his girth makes him take a little less damage, and Technophobe, which means that computers scare me, but that's okay because increased strength and endurance means I can just punch a hole in any monitor I come across. So final tally. Low strength means I have noodle arms, good endurance means I can get more enjoyment out of the local S&M club, good dexterity means I can actually move during combat, max intellect means I can do learning stuff good, max attention means I can tell you all the ways you fucked up painting your Warhammer 40k miniatures, low personality means that if I talk to someone, I might call them an ethnic slur, and bottomed out luck means that if I ever meet Antoine Chigurh, I'm fucked. So the game proper starts with our character sitting in a campfire during a peaceful night. Given that we work for a military organization, we start out with a pretty nice kit, including a fully loaded AK and a decent amount of food. I was immediately robbed and lost all of it. This is how you know this game was made by Eastern Europeans. Alright, well now I have jack shit, so the first order of business is to find civilization and try to get some help. The first town we come to is the village of Otroroy, a small little collective farming town that's doing okay for itself but is apparently having some problems with the local banditry. This area basically serves as the game's second tutorial. Here I did a bunch of basic quests, mostly small stuff that involved talking to people and getting to know the locals. I got pissed drunk off the bar owner's special cocktail, and I also got to pick corn for an old man. Riveting gameplay. I got a rifle out of it though. Ran around, beat the shit out of spiders, rats, and wasps with a shovel so I could get mushrooms for one of the tavern owners. Then I talked to the head of the village, a guy named Kovalev, who was a police detective before the war. A really neat aspect of this game is that it's only set 19 years after the nukes fell, meaning that a majority of the characters you speak to in-game were actually alive back when civilization was still a thing and remember life in a non-nuclear wasteland. This helps to work in the game's concern with Soviet history and society into its world in an extremely organic way. This game expresses a lot of nostalgia for the Soviet system, while at the same time relentlessly satirizing it. Growing up in the United States, communism was always presented to me as this absolute evil, a political system beaten out only by Nazism in its level of pure inhumanity. One of the neat things about playing video games made by people from other countries, especially former Eastern Bloc countries, is that for these people, communism wasn't some abstract hypothetical, but the system in which they lived under. It's this familiarity with living under a communist regime that allows the writers here to create a story that deals with it in a way that avoids the two extremes common in Western depictions of the ideology, namely the comic book style villainy on one end and the overly utopian vision of it on the other. The starting village of Otroroy contains a perfect demonstration of this with the two characters of the village superintendent, Grankin, and the leader, Kovalev. Grankin is a former party official who still clings to the vision of a communist society, whereas Kovalev is a burnout former cop who leads the village according to general Soviet principles, more out of familiarity than a genuine communist vision. Rather than portraying the Soviet government as tyrannical and genocidal, it's depicted as overly bureaucratic and inefficient. Communism or not though, there's still a main quest to do, and if I'm gonna do it, I need money to buy supplies. I got some spare change from doing a couple odd jobs for the villagers, as well as the aforementioned hand-me-down hunting rifle. Talking to Kovalev, he gives me my first big job. The village is being shaken down for protection money by some local bandits. He suspects that the group has a rat in the village and tasks me with finding out who it is. After deducing that it is this fine, young, totally not shady-looking gentleman, Kovalev asks me to lure him out of town and show him his new apartment, 6 feet in the ground. Should be easy enough, I have this rifle with a single bullet, so I'll just shoot him in the face. After getting stabbed like 100 times, I beat him to death with my trusty shovel and used scotch tape to get my organs back into my body, mostly in their original locations. Once again relaying this information to Kovalev, he gives me my biggest task yet, using a calling card I found on the rat's body to infiltrate the bandits' base of operations in a nearby abandoned factory. The local arms dealer gives me a shitty old revolver to help with this task, and I'm off. On my way there, I encounter some traders, as well as the guy from Disco Elysium, and eventually reach my destination. I show the card to the guard at the gate, who lets me in without a fuss. At the base, I talk to several of the bandits, who have a surprising amount of ideological diversity among them. Some of them are little more than just gangsters in it for the money, but several of them actually view themselves as protectors of the villages they exploit, with one man even having a severe stab wound that he received while fighting a group of cannibals who are going to attack Otroroy. Leading these guys is a businessman-like figure named Dan. Dan aspires for his group to advance from ragtag criminals into a legitimate mercenary army, and views his motley crew as the closest thing the region has to law enforcement. You see, while the people of Otroroy and other villages may hate Dan and his men, these guys have been protecting them from cannibals, slavers, and mutants. Like any good RPG, this thrusts you into a situation where there is no clear-cut bad guy, though I'm still wary of Dan's group at this point after seeing some of the people he keeps around. Regardless of my misgivings about this organization, I go undercover within them, performing a variety of odd jobs for Dan that are pretty shady, but never cross the line to outright depravity. One in particular has me going to a small family farm in order to discover what happened to 3 enforcers Dan sent in that direction. Upon arriving at the farm, I talk to the patriarch, who is initially dismissive of me before speechcraft comes in handy and I convince him to reveal what happened. The 3 enforcers arrived at the farm and were killed by the head of the family after they raped and murdered one of his daughters. I expressed my condolences at his loss before sneaking into his house and robbing him blind. Maybe this undercover work is starting to get to me, man. To his credit, Dan is horrified when I tell him what happened and regretful that he ever hired those three. He even decides not to seek any reprisal against the farmer, further establishing him and his group as not exactly good guys, but not completely amoral either. He gives me another quest to go to a place called the Roaring Forest, but we'll save that for later. At this point, I figured it was time to get some work done on the main quest, so I went to Bunker 317. On the way there, I watched an old man get murdered by some bandits, but was able to save his dog, Julbars, who became the first companion I got and followed me around for the rest of the game. In the initial stages, he's a pretty good companion who fucks up most of the enemies you encounter, but later on I just started telling him to go sit in a corner as he became a little less effective against guys in military-grade body armor carrying assault rifles. Alright, first main quest location. I can't pass either of the skill checks to get into the bunker, so I had to enlist the help of some nearby ruffians in order to enter the base. I explored the first area only to find that my progression was gated behind a technology skill check. Okay, that seems kind of antithetical to the whole concept of a CRPG, but whatever, I'll just dump skill points into it on the next few level ups. As I try to leave, the guys outside try to rob me, but I called their leader a dickhead, which made him sad, so they left me alone. Next stop, Krasno... this place. It's the biggest settlement in the game, the only proper city in the region, where you get a majority of the side quests from. In a bar on the edge of town, I pick up my second companion, an Atom agent named Fidel, so named because he likes Cuba and uses Spanish terms and phrases. He's fairly useless in combat, so I mostly used him as a pack mule. One of the few complaints I have with this game is the way it handles the companions. For some unfathomable fucking reason, you can't actually control them during combat. You can only give them orders, which they may or may not follow. The AI on your squad is dumb as all hell, which can make certain encounters, especially later on, extremely frustrating. Moving on into the city proper, I encountered a huge number of NPCs, most of whom had quite a lot to say. I picked up about 3,000 side quests and was introduced to two other major players in wasteland politics. The Chamber of Commerce, a group of politicians largely made up of former Soviet party officials who now run the city, and the Mycelium, a cult that apparently operates on altruistic principles. As a man of many interests, I promptly began working for both organizations. One thing to note about this game's writing is that it makes a lot of pop culture references. The first quest that I did for Mycelium had me talk to a former member whose dialogue consisted entirely of paraphrasing All-Star by Smash Mouth. I'm serious. There's a pulp writer you meet who I'm pretty sure is supposed to be visually based on Lovecraft. Several NPCs have appearances based on Soviet and Russian actors. A mailman gives you a quest that is a clear reference to Pizzagate, and a bartender in the sewers references Diablo before completely breaking the fourth wall and telling you to laugh at the funny reference. So, in a way, the game is kind of like an information dump for both Soviet history and internet culture. What a combo. Speaking of the sewers, we meet a gunrunner down there who begins hiring me out as muscle for his various odd jobs. Also down there, we get a job from a well put together looking guy to clear out some spiders from the sewers. I don't have good enough gear to do that yet, so I get fucked up pretty bad. If you play this game for yourself, get used to seeing this screen, by the way. Atom RPG is an Eastern European game, meaning that it's also a very hard game. If you don't play your cards right with regards to stats, build, and tactics, combat encounters can go south very quickly, as evidenced by this clip of me getting killed by wolves early on in the game. Let me use this aside to reveal something. I've been lying to you, or to put it more accurately, I haven't been telling the whole truth. A little fact that I neglected to mention at the start of the video is that this is not actually my first playthrough of the game. The first character I made was intended to be kind of a generalist, with points put into several skills and balanced special stats. This guy did not fare too well, so after 25 hours I'd pretty much hit a wall with regards to progression and gave up and created a new character using a guide I found right here on YouTube. Anyone who plays this game, I'd recommend you look up a guide for character creation. You don't need to copy it exactly, but they're useful to get a general idea to how you should build your character. Now that I've revealed myself as a fraud, let's get back to the playthrough. Our next destination is the town of Fogolevka. It's a small, serene farming village. We've been sent here by the mob boss from Krasno to kill a drug dealer. I did just that, meaning there is now one less poison-peddling scumbag out there. Don't pay attention to what I'm putting in my inventory. Now, if I had less of a moral compass, I'm told that the place to go if you're drug-dealing scum is a town to the north called Paragon. Upon arriving, I find that this den of iniquity is in a state of political turmoil between the opposing factions of the merchants who run the place and the guards who protect them. No one ever bothered me about this conflict, so I didn't pay attention to it. I'm here to talk to scumbags and sell them weed laced with motor oil in Minecraft. After hanging out with the locals, doing some quick side jobs, and getting into the entrepreneurial spirit, I decided to investigate that restaurant the mailman told me about. I told them some bullshit about some merchants having supplies for them and went to investigate the basement. All in good fun, as I'm sure that guy was just crazy. Yeah, they make snuff films down here. I played Manhunt, I can dig it. So I discussed my issues with the establishment when the owners returned and went on my merry way, on to the Roaring Forest. So the reason it's called the Roaring Forest is because the area is the site of frequent earthquakes of unknown origin. After arriving, I soon discover the source of the disruptions is a group of strange mutants underground that have been burrowing underneath the surface. I clear out most of them with the exception of the mama bug that has a health pool that is very large and a damage output that deletes me within a single turn. I don't need to kill everything though, just find out what the hell's going on, so I leave and go back to Dan. Dan is pleased with my work for him and promises to give me one last big job if I return in a day or two. Perfect opportunity to go back to the bunker and put my newly upgraded tech skill to the test. What do you know, I know how to use a keyboard now. Exploring the rest of the bunker, I find nothing but vague indications of what kind of research was going on here. What catches my attention the most, though, is the large group of very dead soldiers I found. I'm gonna guess these are the Atom guys I'm looking for. Even stranger is two other corpses present, that of individuals who wear the insignia of the mycelium cult. Like you probably do, I found it very suspicious that members of a humanitarian organization appear to have been killed in a firefight with heavily armed soldiers. I joined the group, also known as the Mushroom Cult, a name that they don't actually seem to mind all that much, and I'm given my first assignment, retrieving a water filter from a location called the Death Tunnel. Alright, let's do some other stuff first. Earlier in the game in Fidel's bar, I met a guy named Strategist. He's a merc hired by Dan to organize an assault on a group of slavers that are planning to attack a Tradnoi. I helped him hire a crew of sharpshooters to carry out the plan, and then I promptly forgot all about it. I finally showed up at some train tracks to help them, where we made short work of our targets. After parting ways with the mercenaries and doing some post-battle looting of corpses, I got paid by Strategist and went to carry out my next job, clearing out the town of Red Fighter for a fellow Atom agent. Me and my cadre of collectivists arrive and clear the town of its current population of arachnids of unusual size. Afterwards, I came across an old man taking shelter in one of the houses here. He's an aspiring writer of socialist literature who calls himself Hexogen. In between his barely comprehensible rants about numerous topics, he makes a commitment to follow me around and aid me in my travels, becoming my third companion. So, setting up Red Fighter is off my to-do list, on to the circus. As the name would imply, this is a freak show where people pay money to see various mutants do weird shit. I'm glad the graphics in this game are as primitive as they are, because some of these mutations sound fairly disgusting, especially this lady who talks about having a huge ass and laying eggs, and there's this guy who just, Jesus Christ. Some more small jobs here. I convinced several of the carnies to star in a porno for a guy back in Krasno, then I talked to the leader and get everybody to fuck off, which is a job that a guy in the Chamber of Commerce hired me for. After doing all this stuff, I'm rich as fuck now, just like Marx intended or whatever. I was about to embark on my way to the Death Tunnel until I met this guy in the town square who hired me to help his militia recover a statue of Lenin from some scavengers. So I go there, meet up with the guys, and we begin the attack. It seems that in the century since their victory in the Civil War, the Bolsheviks have lost their edge because they got fucking rocked by the scavengers, and I ended up having to finish everyone off myself. On the plus side though, I managed to get an absurd amount of loot from the battle's aftermath. Also found a car, which blew up and killed me when I tried to fix it, so that's not getting used. Alright, one last stop before the Death Tunnel, the Thug Fortress. It's supposed to be really hard, but I'm geared to my teeth at this point, so me and my boys make pretty short work of these guys. I get my fourth and final companion here, a woman whose name I can't pronounce, but that the game just calls, oh god. Well, she doesn't do a damn thing in combat, but she can carry around a lot of stuff, so there's that, I guess. On to the Death Tunnel. First things first, this shit lives up to its name. There's a lot of stuff in here that wants to kill you. Luckily it wasn't too hard, although my dog and my human were starting to get kind of annoying to keep track of during fights. I got the water filter and then skedaddled out of there, avoiding these big bastards that take 1,000 shots to kill, and get my next assignment from the cult, discovering what happened to 2 expeditions they sent to explore old military bunkers. Again? These bunkers require me to spend fuckloads of money going to separate world maps. First is the Mountain Pass of Woes. It's a woodland region that's supposed to be a lot more dangerous than the wider region, although it seemed about the same to me. I was actually here earlier in my playthrough and did some bullshit for some people in a castle, so I was kind of annoyed that the main quest has you go back here. I get to the bunker, run around, do some exploring, have to solve some puzzles that I have no idea how the fuck you're supposed to figure out without a guide, and obtain the most powerful weapon in the game, the VER rifle. On top of the damage it does, I also have a perk that soups up my crit damage as well as my base chance to land a crit with any scoped weapon. I'm definitely keeping it, but I plan to save it for later because ammo for it seems to be really rare. Also in this bunker, frustration personified. We're in the home stretch of the game now, so like most CRPGs, Atom RPG is contractually obligated to culminate in a final section that makes you want to break your keyboard over your knee like you're fucking Bane. In this area, you come into conflict with 2 different types of plant mutants, the Pest and the Bloodroot. Right off the bat, these names should be switched around, because the Pest is a plant that's rooted into the ground, and the Bloodroot is a fast-moving creature that's annoying as hell, or in other words, a pest. 10 points off the game's final score for that mix-up right there. Main thing you need to know is that neither of these fucking things are fun to fight. They both have like 1 trillion action points per turn, which they use to fuck your face out of existence. The Bloodroots also have a decent bit of health, which they regain every time they hit either you or your allies. I didn't do extensive research about throughout the main quest, so I was totally unprepared for this, which wouldn't have been that big a deal, except getting to and from this region costs thousands of rubles. This shit was so goddamn frustrating, dude. If I could fuck off and get better gear somewhere else, it wouldn't have been that bad, but traversing the world in this game is such a bitch that that option's off the table. I gotta say, I came really close to giving up right here. When I had to restart and make a new character, I didn't mind that much, because I wasn't that far into the game, so it was just part of the learning process. But this felt like it almost required prior knowledge to be prepared for it, which I think is kind of bullshit. Not being able to directly control your companions also helps to make this area even more frustrating, as they kept getting themselves into stupid-ass situations no matter how much I try to micromanage them. Eventually, I just said fuck it, pulled out the VER, and was able to one-tap most everything and make it to the end. So I found the cult's expedition, and also discovered that they apparently pulled tons of their members from Adam, which is concerning, to say the least. One of the soldiers has also become one with this mushroom being or some shit that the bunker was experimenting on. There's red flags all up and down the fucking walls here, but I don't got enough ammo, health, or sanity left to fight these guys, so I just help them, load up the shrooms, and see them off on their way. Alright, so now I'm going to the Dead City. I didn't stick around here for long. You get ambient radiation poisoning, and the stalkers at the beach hype this place up as being hell on earth, so this is gonna be a smash and grab. I stopped at a couple places on my way to the bunker, didn't really make any good finds other than the fact that ghouls in this game are piss easy to kill, so that's nice. The bunker is the fucking rat kingdom, these bastards are everywhere. Overall, this bunker was a lot easier to deal with than the last one. Once again, played it cool with the cultists, helping them load the shrooms with no protest. I was fairly certain at this point that all this was going towards nefarious ends, but I was kind of hoping I'd be able to throw a wrench in the works at a more opportune time for me. Back in Krasno, I figured that I was closing in on the end of the game at this point, so I wrapped up the last side quest in the wasteland, got stocked up at a gun dealer, and went to the cult headquarters. Well, this is an interesting development. Turns out that while I've been dicking around out in the wastes, the Adam organization has undergone a bit of a shakeup. Remember how I said that Mycelium apparently pulls a lot of members from ex-Adam guys? Apparently they also get a lot of dudes who are active in the organization to join them as well, meaning that over the years they've effectively managed to infiltrate the most secretive and well-armed faction in the wasteland. My level of concern has now drastically increased. The only Adam members I've interacted with out here are Fidel, the guy who hired me to clear out Red Fighter, and a dude named Alexander, who can be your companion, which I initially planned to do, but I didn't realize that if your party is already full, he just fucks off instead. Whatever, according to his dialogue, he's half human, half mutant worm now, so I don't need to put up with his shit, screw him. So the Adam soldiers get bored with just waiting around for the cult to do something, so instead of helping me, they go back to base to deal with the aftermath of the Adam Civil War that started while I was away. Mycelium got pushed out of the group and all the spies were killed, so Adam's integrity has been restored. I just gotta figure out what the fuck they're doing with all those mushrooms. Turns out that under their headquarters is yet another bunker. I get into a fight with a squad of the cultists, and holy fuck, these guys are packing. Most of their guns can kill me in a single burst. I can one-shot them as well, but it's inconsistent and there's like 20 of them. My companions are about as helpful as an STD, and the dog and woman keep getting fucking killed, so I just tell her to fuck off and get everyone else to sit in a side office. Eventually, I'm able to beat these guys after placing down some time bombs that exploded underneath them, and then I proceed to toss as many pineapples as I could at them. Eventually I ran out and was down to like 3 guys left, and at that point it was just a matter of trying to get a lucky crit shot and reloading every time things didn't go my way. I managed to go the whole rest of the game without save scumming, but at this point I was out of options. So with the last group of enemies defeated, I descended further into the bunker to finally get to the bottom of things. At the bottom, I encounter none other than General Morozov himself. Turns out that from the start, my whole assignment was a charade. Morozov's expedition into the wastes actually occurred over a decade ago, shortly after the war. He came into contact with a sentient psychic mushroom, a being that was created by Soviet scientists before the war as some kind of contingency plan to help rebuild society if things with Adam didn't pan out. Using its psychic abilities, however, the mushroom was able to tap into ethereal forces within the universe and became aware of an approaching meteor on a collision course with Earth. This collision would bring about a second, much deadlier apocalypse, which the shroom estimated would kill off 95% of all life on the planet, probably including it. It told this to Morozov, who promptly agreed to link his mind with that of the fungus, and begin luring highly trained and heavily armed Adam personnel out into the wastes so they could bolster their forces to enact their grand plan of survival. That plan, in case you're wondering, is to use the water filter that some dumbass got for them to put spores in the water supply of all the various settlements of the region. After everyone was linked up to a central hive mind, the mushroom could put everyone to work as slaves essentially, working on a plan to destroy the asteroid before it hits Earth. The purpose of the 2 expeditions that I recovered was to get the other clusters of the fungus hive mind so they could all be joined together under one roof. As with any good RPG, you get several options of what to say to all these revelations. I was not a fan of the mushroom's plan, as I figured that I'd rather have humanity take its chances against a giant rock than live as mushroom zombies for the rest of eternity. I relayed this to Morozov, who... You're fucking with me, right? Being for real though, this fight was actually a lot easier than the last one. After I killed the last group, I made like a member of Viet Cong and looted every goddamn thing off their bodies, meaning that I now had an arsenal that would make the NRA blush. On top of that, I also got a bunch of syringes full of experimental combat stimulants, which I proceeded to ingest in copious amounts, along with my companions. As a result, I was going into this last encounter armed with the very best guns in the game and fucking blasted it on combat heroin that's gonna have me seeing Jacob's Ladder shit after this is over. It's worth it though, because I was able to mow down the last few enemies with minimal help from my companions. Hexogen only fired his gun twice, I think, doing barely any damage, and Fidel actually shot me in the back, also twice. Whatever, the game's over now, so let's go over all the shit that happened after it was all said and done. Otroroy grew to become a prosperous village under the guidance of a newly elected leader that was selected through legitimate democratic means and not me rigging it in her favor as part of a quest that I did for Dan that I alluded to earlier in this script and then forgot to elaborate upon until I got to this part. Speaking of Dan, the Factory Gang grew to become a legitimate law enforcement organization that cooperated with Otroroy to help it become one of the dominant settlements in the region. After Dan was shot by an anonymous gunman, the group disbanded and scattered off into the wastes, no longer needed by the local communities. Red Fighter, the town that I helped the Atom Agent start, became the second most prominent city in the area. Like Otroroy, it was prosperous and run by fair leaders, who erected a statue in honor of both me and the guy I founded the town for. Krasno floundered and eventually lost most of its grip on the wastes. As other competing settlements gained power, its ability to keep up with the changing political landscape was hampered by the leaders' paranoia and isolation. Paragon completely fell apart as a result of that political conflict that I totally ignored. Fidel continued being an Atom Agent until an op went wrong and he got smoked. Hexogen moved to a post-war metropolis called Trudograd and became a mildly successful author. The last remnants of the Mushroom Cult scattered out across the wastes to join a mishmash of different political and humanitarian organizations, and the game didn't say what happened to the dog, which is sad. As for me, apparently the story's become contradictory beyond this point. Some say that I continue to work for Atom, helping people across the wastes and working on a plan to save humanity from the second apocalypse. Others say I became a wanderer, lending a hand to various trade caravans and merchants. What did I actually do? You'll just have to wait until I get around to making a video on the sequel at some point. Until then, I'll end the video here. Atom RPG is a really good game. It's got some low points, some rough edges, but it's a game made by a clearly talented group of developers with a distinct vision for their games. As game development becomes more accessible, it's nice to see people from all over the world make experiences that reflect their own native cultures. One of the best parts of this game was all the little tidbits and story beats that pay homage to Russian and broader Eastern European history. As an American, it's not something I'm very familiar with, and one of the strengths of video games, and really creative mediums in general, is the ways in which they can be really engaging ways to learn about different cultures and aspects of world history. Whether it be games like this or Stalker from Eastern Europe, stuff like Blasphemous from Spain, or a game like 0 Hour that comes from a team in Bangladesh, one of the literal poorest countries in the world, it's awesome to see that we're reaching a point where more people's voices can be heard. I'm excited to eventually play the sequel to Atom RPG, and I'm even more excited to play more games emerging from this new wave of CRPGs and games from fledgling game development industries. Hey everybody, if you made it this far into the video, I just wanted to say thanks. It means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all your standard YouTube outro stuff that you always hear. And other than that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.